you for attending today's webcast, breakout session 4B, Utility, Energy Efficiency, and Climate Goals, Technical Issues. I am David Tansable, and I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency's State and Local Climate and Energy Program. And I'll be moderating this session. We'll be starting the webcast and a few housekeeping announcements first, and then we'll get into the presenters, followed by the Q&A. So first and foremost, thank you to all our sponsors and ally members for their support of the Energy Efficiency as a Resource Conference and ACEEE. Attendees are in listen-only mode, so please use the chat box on the right side of your screen to ask questions to the presenters. As moderator, I'll be sharing your questions with the presenters following the presentation if time allows. Otherwise, we will continue a Q&A on Zoom after this session. So watch for the Zoom link in the chat that will be posted during the session, or download it in the resources section. Please refrain from using the chat for any dialogue other than asking questions. If there is an attendee you would like to connect, please use the attendees link on the left-hand side of the column of the presentation. All registrants are listed alphabetically. Also on the left side, if you find you can find the resources section. Resources contain a copy of the program in a PDF format, all attendee lists for downloading, Zoom links for all the chats and discussions, and an evaluation form we ask everyone to complete after they view their last session. Anyone who completes the evaluation and includes their name and testimonial will receive a $25 discount to attend the 2023 National Conference on Energy Efficiency as a Resource in Philadelphia. All presentations today will be available on demand viewing within a few days on the Engagement Hub. Presenters' PowerPoints can be found on their page in the program participation section. And now I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers. They are Alan Zielinski from the Oregon Department of Energy, Matt Rustica from Acadia Center, Leslie Malone, the Dunsky Energy Climate Advisors. We will start with our first speaker, who is Alan Zielinski. And Alan is the Assistant Director for Planning and Innovation at the Oregon Department of Energy. His team works on energy efficiency, renewable resources, sustainable transportation, energy planning, and climate change issues. Before joining ODOE, he was the energy services leader for Kennedy Jenks Consultants for 10 years, a consulting firm where he worked with clients all over the West on climate change, energy efficiency, and renewables. Prior to that, Alan worked at Emerald Putt in Eugene for over 21 years, and he was the power manager and energy efficiency program manager. Alan graduated with a degree in political economy from UC Berkeley and got a master's degree in energy planning and policy from the University of Oregon. In his spare time, Alan is in the 4th term as a Eugene City Councilor. So I'd like to welcome Alan.
Thanks, Dave. It's Zelenka, but you get a pass on that one, Dave. So thank you. I'm going to talk today about energy efficiency being at a crossroads and whether Jed Kreber can save energy efficiency. So talk about energy efficiency at a crossroads, it'd be helpful to take a look at the past, the present, and what we should be doing in the future to capture the full true value of energy efficiency as we move forward. National focus on energy efficiency started a long time ago, and we've accomplished quite a bit since then. There's nothing like a really good crisis to stimulate change, and the 1973 oil embargo forced a lot of change in the U.S. It ushered in CAFE standards, which for car fuel efficiency, and I believe that's one of the first energy efficiency laws in the country. Shortly after that, the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, EPCA, of 1975, and the Energy Conservation and Production Act, ECPA, of 1976 were the start of the national energy efficiency policies and programs. And so if you're a history buff, I commend, look those up, they're kind of fun. According to ACEEE, from 1980 to 2014, while the US GDP grew and increased about 150%, energy use only increased about 25%. That's about 1/6, 6-to-1 ratio of GDP growth to energy use. So ACEEE concluded that as of 2014, energy efficiency was saving US customers and businesses over $800 billion per year. Many factors have driven these efficiency gains, including market forces, policies, and programs. Lower cost of energy efficiency has unleashed market forces to accelerate this development. We have seen dramatic increases in technology efficiency. Clothes washers increased efficiency by 75%, air conditioners 50%, refrigerators 65%, car efficiency, MPG, has gone up about 25%. We have programs like Energy Star labeling, utility incentive programs, and building codes and green building programs have also flourished. And then government policies like efficiency standards and tax credits help promote energy efficiency. Interestingly, ACEEE said that energy efficiency or energy prices have not been a major driver in energy efficiency gains. The 1973 oil crisis also resulted in states taking action. In 1975, Oregon created the Oregon Department of Energy. And by 1980, Congress had passed the Pacific Northwest Electric Power and Planning Conservation Act, or the POWER Act, as we like to call it, because that's too long of a title. And that was partly in response to the whoops nuclear debacle that we experienced here. The POWER Act directed that energy efficiency be given the first priority for resource acquisition. It was the first time in history that energy efficiency was put on par with generating resources. This was truly the dawn of least cost planning, or integrated resource planning as we know it today. In the early 1980s, it was one thing to prioritize energy efficiency, but it was another to actually deploy it as a reliable resource. At the suggestion of NRDC's Ralph Cavanagh, in partnership with BPA and Pacific Power, Hood River Project was developed to test whether or not energy efficiency could be cost effectively acquired at utility scale. It had not been done before. And we needed to measure it with certainty so we could count on it. The Hood River Project ended up being a huge success and proved the concept of utility scale acquisitions of energy efficiency. And this was really the beginning of energy efficiency revolution and the utility programs that we know today. Putting energy efficiency first has resulted in the Northwest energy efficiency becoming the second largest electricity resource, right behind hydropower. As of 2020, we have acquired more than 7,200 average megawatts of energy efficiency in the Northwest, and over 2,200 of that has been in Oregon. And energy efficiency is saving the region ratepayers over $4 billion per year on their electricity bills. And we're emitting about 24 million less tons of greenhouse gas emissions every year because of energy efficiency investments. So energy efficiency is a big deal with a big impact. And we're also pretty proud, well, every year, well, not last year, but ACEEE puts out their scorecard that ranks energy efficiency efforts of all 50 states. And we're pretty proud in Oregon that we've ranked in the top 10 for each of the last 13 years. There's also a lot of energy efficiency still to be had. The 7th Power Plan says that there is an additional 4,400 average megawatts of cost-effective energy efficiency that can be acquired by 2035 in the Pacific Northwest. Nationally, according to ACEEE, cost-effective energy efficiency can reduce energy use by another 40 to 60% by 2050. So incentives really matter. There's a clear linkage between incentives and energy efficiency program effectiveness. Policies matter too. ACEEE found that states with energy efficiency resource standards policies, which require utilities to achieve certain percentage of energy efficiency savings each year, they achieve annual savings at a rate 4 times more than states without energy efficiency resource standards. Overall, there's 33 states that have efficiency standards in the United States. As well, cost-effective methodologies matter too. Historically, cost-effective energy efficiency has been a pure cost calculation. There's not been a big problem. This hasn't been a big problem because energy efficiency has been the lowest cost resource, and it was abundant. So actually, times have changed, and now low-cost solar has actually eclipsed energy efficiency. When I was starting out in this business years ago, I never thought solar would be the enemy of energy efficiency. But with this drop in the price of renewables, energy efficiency is now having to compete with renewables on cost. And in the Pacific Northwest, the 8th Power Plan has dropped the energy efficiency acquisition target by as much as half. That puts energy efficiency at a crossroads. Besides having to be cost effective, energy efficiency now being asked to solve a whole new crop of challenges and achieve a myriad of goals, from stimulating economic growth and jobs to enhancing reliability and resilience to taking action on climate change. So to allow energy efficiency to achieve its full potential, we need to calculate the true value of energy efficiency. So come on, slide, you can do it. So I think it's time that we quantify the other benefits of energy efficiency, not traditionally taken into consideration when we do resource planning or integrated resource planning. Because it was the lowest cost resource and abundant, we didn't have to take into consideration a myriad of other benefits that energy efficiency brings to the table. Now we do because of solar. By doing this, we'll get a complete picture of the energy efficiency's true value and benefit, the real value of energy efficiency. Accounting for these unquantified benefits should, in the end, increase the amount of energy efficiency that we end up acquiring. So what benefits are not included in the traditional cost-effectiveness methodology? There are benefits that do fit in the traditional methodology for cost effectiveness, like valuing capacity and energy. But then there are benefits that do not fit into the traditional cost effectiveness methodology. I tried to think of a list of other benefits that energy efficiency brings to the table that we need to evaluate more and to get a full and robust cost effectiveness methodology. And they are jobs. Energy efficiency creates a significant number of family wage jobs. It enhances distributed energy resources. By reducing loads, energy efficiency makes distributed energy resources go further and can help with reducing renewable energy ramp rates. Decarbonization. Since energy efficiency is a zero carbon resource, it helps combat climate change. It's invisible. Energy efficiency resources, for the most part, have little to no environmental impact. Capacity. Energy efficiency can reduce the need for expensive capacity additions to the system and help reduce the impact of new EV loads, for example. Resilience. Energy efficiency can make homes, businesses, and the grid more resilient in emergencies. Energy burden is the next one. Energy efficiency can improve equity by reducing energy bills. Beneficial electrification. By reducing loads, energy efficiency makes electrification easier to accomplish. Reliability. Energy efficiency makes our energy system more dependable and can help mitigate the transmission constraints. I'm sure you can come up with your other worthy benefits as well, like public health benefits is a good example. But I was trying to figure out a way to remember all these other benefits. And my wife likes to do word jumbles. So by taking the first letter of each of these benefits, the benefits spell out Jedi Kreber. May the Force be with Jedi Kreber. So how do we move forward? I think it's time that we actually redo and expand and modernize the cost effectiveness methodology for energy efficiency. So how do we do that? There are numerous ways of moving forward and recognizing, acknowledging, and quantifying this new and improved cost effectiveness methodology for energy efficiency. In the Pacific Northwest, there are many asking the Power Council to start an investigation into quantifying the real value of energy efficiency. We can also rely on PUC dockets. They're another way of moving this concept forward. In California, the PUC recently performed its approach to energy efficiency programs to better align with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, supporting customer equity, and long-term energy grid stability. It could also be integrated into resource planning, incorporate this new updated energy efficiency cost-effective methodology. Legislation can also help. Legislators can take this issue up and require another investigation or adoption of new rules. So if your state's working on innovative ideas or other ways of moving this forward, we at ODOSHA would like to hear from you, so let us know. One way or another, including these benefits in the new and improved cost effectiveness methodology for energy efficiency, we will acknowledge the real benefits and the true value of energy efficiency. So the question is, will Jedi Crabber save energy efficiency? Thanks.
Thank you, Alan Zelenka. And I apologize on mispronouncing the name there, but I will remember Zelenka and Jedi Kreber. Thank you. And so our next speaker is Matt Rustica. Matt is a senior policy analyst at Acadia Center. His work focuses on consumer economics and zero emission building retrofits, energy efficiency program design and cost effectiveness testing, and regulatory approaches to phasing out natural gas use. Prior to joining Acadia Center, Matt coordinated the Massachusetts Energy Efficiency Advisory Council, which oversees Mass Save, and led evaluation research for energy efficiency programs in the US and Canada. He lives in an all-electric home in Scituate, Massachusetts, with his wife, 2 sons, and dog. Matt will be presenting on energy efficiency as a crossroads. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much. We see my slides. Excellent. Hi again. My name is Matt Rustica with Acadia Center. To begin, I just want to set the stage for anyone out there who may not be familiar with the subject matter. And thank you, Alan, who touched on a bunch of topics that I'm going to touch on in the presentation today. So efficiency programs, as many of you no doubt know, decide what to incentivize kind of partially on the basis of a cost effectiveness test. The test compares the cost of acquiring efficiency to the cost of acquiring energy resources in the usual way, like from a power plant. And the form of the test, as Alan talked about, can really exert a significant influence on what happens and what doesn't happen in a program. So I'm here to talk about that dynamic as it relates specifically to climate change. A little bit about Acadia Center before I begin. We are a nonprofit research and advocacy organization devoted to advancing bold, effective, and equitable clean energy solutions for a livable climate and a stronger economy. I'm our Buildings Initiative Director, which includes a lot of work around gas, as well as efficiency and clean heating. And we've been doing a lot of analysis in the past 9 months or so about how to align energy efficiency cost effectiveness testing, or BCA, benefit cost analysis, more closely with our climate laws in New England, New York, and New Jersey, where Acadia Center has a presence. So I'm going to present some of the results of that analysis today. So why are we talking about this? Always good to answer that question. So as Alan touched on, efficiency remains our lowest cost energy resource, but energy prices still don't really reflect all these other concerns: climate, equity, health, other policy priorities that states have. And as I said, benefit cost analysis is kind of fundamentally a price comparison. For the most part, I think we all know, the real avoided costs of climate change are so inconceivably humongous that it would just blow up programs if you loaded them all on the benefit side of the equation. There's the social cost of carbon, which is kind of a measure of damages, but then, all the other kind of just the huge impact. So in light of that, what does it mean to align efficiency with climate policy? It's kind of a thorny question. I would argue that it means heavily weighting measures that permanently displace fossil fuels within the measure mix, while still preserving cost effectiveness as it's been defined, and limiting bill impacts to the maximum possible extent. And that largely means measures that focus on fuel switching and heating and water heating, particularly where I am in a cold state, active demand management, and more and deeper weatherization jobs. Um, but benefit cost analysis, as it is, kind of struggles to capture this additional value of emissions displacement rather than just kind of a nominal reduction. Um, uh, so the question I want to ask is, how can we build that nuance into the program's accounting while keeping the lane fully open for the energy efficiency that has served us so well over the course of all these years? So I want to make 6 points today, and here they are. The common thread between these is that hanging another benefit, another kind of bubble on the existing test procedure, our analysis shows probably isn't enough. We need to look a little bit more holistically, start to experiment with some other ways of determining what to invest in efficiency programs. This is the Energy Efficiency as a Resource conference. What I want to posit here is a kind of an EER plus. So instead of efficiency being just a least cost procurement program that acts separately from other state clean energy commitments, we need to make it a tool for procuring not just energy but also emissions. Basically, is my pitch here. So let's get into the analysis results that we've generated. So the first solution that you hear in discussions about the overlap between efficiency and climate is the need for programs to add and avoid cost of carbon as a benefit, which is reasonable. Of course, all efficiency has some kind of greenhouse gas impact because all energy use currently mostly entails some amount of fossil fuel usage. Our analysis shows that adding that benefit does indeed add benefits, but not significantly more so for some measures than others. As I said, climate alignment in efficiency programs is kind of a matter of the measure mix. And programs are aligned with climate policy to the extent that they facilitate fossil fuel displacement. So it's reasonable to think that, while these benefits can sometimes bring marginal measures or initiatives across the finish line that wouldn't have otherwise penciled out as cost effective, it's hard to make the case that they'll change the measure mix, change the focus of the programs on their own. So we've determined that there are kind of better or more complete ways of addressing this particular issue. So how do we eliminate emissions in buildings? Well, our analysis found that targeting kind of super emitting buildings can help programs achieve emissions abatement while staying within the bounds of their traditional kind of framework, cost effectiveness wise as well as program delivery wise. There is an overlap between high savings and high greenhouse gas mitigation out there in the world. Programs can target projects that maximize that overlap under their existing frameworks. What I mean specifically is that some homes are a lot less efficient than average. Recently, Synapse Energy Economics published a blog that said that 22% of homes in Massachusetts account for half of the state's residential emissions. And so that's something like 575,000 housing units out of the 2.6 million in the state. And targeting those homes for weatherization and whole home electrification can result in just really huge benefits for programs, as well as higher BCRs, right? Which isn't necessarily the case depending on what the cost of the stuff is. Granted, usually cost effectiveness isn't assessed at the project level, at least not determinatively, but integrating more of these projects into the larger initiative can improve cost effectiveness, can improve economic benefits, can kind of make the case within the totality of the efficiency framework in whatever state that targeting these buildings is just really beneficial, both from an energy resource standpoint and from a climate standpoint. And that's what this chart kind of shows. You can see that on the right, the drafty home, the notably inefficient home, electrification and weatherization together just has these huge benefits relative to an average home. Okay. I want to talk about a part of climate policy that we really can't afford to ignore, which is environmental justice. So just to be clear, justice is a goal in itself. It can't usually be measured in dollars, but it remains imperative. It's a general task of government. Um, all that stuff is, justice precedes efficiency. Fortunately, however, the things that you do to support environmental justice are the same things you do to reduce emissions. So, for instance, weatherization has substantial health effects in terms of thermal stress and asthma. Replacing fuel-fired appliances with electric ones reduces indoor air pollution. Some recent studies by RMI have shown that pretty conclusively. And more broadly, environmental justice communities are much more likely to live in these kind of high energy intensity housing units that I described before. At the same time, though, we know that low and moderate income households haven't had equal access to programs, at least not in the region where I am. Why is that? Well, they can't just kind of come calling when you make incentives available, right? They have barriers. They might not control their energy use decisions because they rent, or they don't have disposable income. They don't have time to do legwork, which is a huge issue. They might not speak English. The more resources that programs spend on overcoming these barriers, the less cost effective they look, because spending money on this stuff doesn't result directly in savings. It's only kind of indirect. Setting aside funding for engagement could help. So say, for instance, you were to fund some trusted community-based organization to do outreach for energy efficiency programs. That's a way to acknowledge the benefit of engagement. And then leaving that out of the test can kind of just test the efficiency as the efficiency, and not kind of count the cost of engagement as a cost when in fact it's a benefit. I want to talk about gas. In my introduction, we said that I work on the issue of gas regulation, gas distribution system regulation in light of climate policy. Natural gas, I recognize, is a tough topic. Lots of energy efficiency program administrators are gas utilities. It does bear stating, though, that natural gas is a fossil fuel, and fossil fuels have caused climate change. So we know that aligning efficiency with climate policy is going to require some tough decisions about gas. Our analysis found that gas to heat pump fuel switching is actually cheaper than doing nothing in the context of climate. So we know that electrification costs money. Heat pumps and other such equipment is more expensive in terms of capital cost than business as usual. It also requires kind of investing in new grid resources, whether it's wires or ancillary services or what have you. But all these costs, when taken together, are less than the social cost of carbon. I mentioned this before. It's kind of a measure of future adverse impacts of climate change in dollars per ton. So making that comparison and maybe even adopting it as a secondary test within your regulatory regime in a state can help to bring efficiency out of its silo. Like how does any energy efficiency, the cost of efficiency, compare to other strategies for reducing emissions in terms of cost? We know there's a real value to emissions abatement. This is a way to kind of like visualize that. On that same note, I want to talk about an approach that SMUD has adopted in California, very far away from me. I'm located in Boston. But the Sacramento Municipal Utility District has this really kind of innovative approach to this issue that I wanted to talk about. This chart shows my adaptation of their approach to Massachusetts. SMUD's metric assesses the impact that abating 1 ton of carbon dioxide would have on the rate base. So what that means is that they calculate the cost of new electric supply, all those new costs that electrification engenders on the grid. They subtract from that the revenue that the electric utility will get from generating all these new kilowatt hours, and then they express that net cost in terms of cost per ton. So if there's more revenue than cost, then you get a negative number. What this tells us is that by spreading the costs of electrification across a huge number of new kilowatt hours, electric utilities can actually put downward pressure on rates while generating more revenue. Again, this is not my idea. This is something from SMUD. But I think it's really revolutionary, particularly for me in a cold climate. where there are a lot of concerns about new winter peak and kind of grid impacts of electrification once we get to scale. Again, adopting a test like this in other jurisdictions beyond SMUD could provide a lot of visibility into the program's ability to contribute to greenhouse gas mitigation in buildings. So then we thought, how would it look if we build some of the kind of other non-energy impacts currently accounted for by programs into that type of metric? And as you can see, health and safety, especially something like asthma, can more than double benefits relative to that other metric. It really starts to look, like really clear. How many benefits these measures can offer. It's important to note that the NEIs that are referenced for this chart are calculated using the actuarial value of human life, and that may or may not be considered appropriate by regulators in one state relative to another. But that said, it raises an interesting question that I just want to leave us on here, which is that if emissions, health, safety, reliability, all the other benefits that we know energy efficiency can help with that were listed helpfully in Alan's presentation, if those come to outweigh the energy benefits, it raises a lot of difficult questions for regulators, for policymakers in states, especially with reference to kind of energy efficiency being a least cost procurement mechanism. And I think that that's something that we're going to be working on at Acadia Center in the coming years to help policymakers in the Northeast to navigate that transition. That's it for me. There's my contact information. Thank you very much. And I'll hand it off.
Great. Thank you, Matt Rustica. Our next speaker is Leslie Malone. Leslie brings 15 years of experience in clean energy and environmental policy, development and analysis, and a broad knowledge of energy markets and legislative and regulatory environment in Canada and the United States. She supports utility, government, nonprofit, and industry clients navigate complex technical and policy questions to arrive at strategic solutions that align with their unique needs. Prior to joining the Dunsky team, Leslie was with the Acadia Center, where she worked on energy efficiency, renewable energy, grid modernization, and carbon pricing issues. In addition to her policy work, she has led various analytic studies, including energy efficiency and demand response potential studies, as well as assessments in the macroeconomic impacts of energy efficiency and the value of solar to the grid and society. Leslie holds an MSc from the University of London Imperial College with a specialization in environmental economics, and a BSc from Mount Allison University. Leslie will present on size versus substance, shifting our focus on energy efficiency targets. Welcome, Leslie.
Perfect. These are my slides. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to reiterate David's welcome and thank you for joining us today. As he mentioned, I'm going to be speaking specifically to energy efficiency targets and how they're evolving or may need to evolve under new policy paradigms. Just going to quickly start by introducing our firm. For those of you who are not familiar with Dunsky, we're a consulting firm headquartered in Montreal. Our expertise lies in the buildings, renewables, and mobility space. And in these areas, we work with our clients to quantify opportunities, so what can be achieved, at what cost and benefit, designing strategies, so how do we best deliver results and what outcomes can be expected, and evaluating performance to ensure continuous improvement. So across the spectrum, we engage pretty much continuously, except we do not deliver programs. And over the last 17 years or so, we've been working with governments, utilities, service providers, and others on both sides of the border to help accelerate the clean energy transition. So this this information on the slide. It's not going to be news to many in this audience, but as a quick overview on energy efficiency savings targets, utilities and other energy efficiency program administrators are often required to track and report on a wide variety of metrics. Target metrics reflect the primary goal of energy efficiency, and other metrics may also be used to track additional or secondary objectives or constraints. Ultimately, the target metric that's employed reflects the primary goal or the desired outcome of an energy efficiency program, and it guides performance management. So it's ultimately the basis of success. There are different classification schemes that are out there, but we group the most common target types into 4 categories based on what is being measured. So a jurisdiction may have an energy savings target, and these targets may be expressed in absolute volumetric terms, for example, X number of megawatt hours or megawatts, or as a relative percentage reduction target. A jurisdiction may have a cost effectiveness target expressed as a benefit cost ratio or net benefits. Investment levels could be another type of target, or as we've seen emerge in select jurisdictions such as SMUD and more recently Massachusetts, a carbon target that's specific to energy efficiency programs. Just making sure my slides advance. So traditionally, efficiency has been viewed as an economic utility resource, with jurisdictions predominantly using energy savings and demand reduction targets. And within these jurisdictions, the focus in leading states, at least, has tended towards maximizing achievable potential. However, as both Alan and Mac mentioned, over the last number of years, we've started to see the role of and expectations for efficiency broaden to include other energy system benefits and public policy goals. So we're seeing an emerging focus on efficiency as an energy system resource that has locational, temporal, peak benefits. It's increasingly looked at as a key tool to reducing GHG emissions. Efficiency platforms are starting to incorporate electrification measures, fuel switching in some jurisdictions, and it's also viewed as a means to improve equity among other goals. So this really begs the question, are our efficiency targets still focused on the right outcomes, or do we need to change them to reflect new and emerging goals? So at this stage, we're not seeing necessarily a rush to new target setting across the board. In Canada, all provinces with efficiency targets have savings-based targets, and similarly in the US, the majority of states still use savings-based targets, although stateside you do see there's somewhat more variability and exceptions have started to emerge. So for example, one way that jurisdictions are starting to balance competing policy priorities is to use a scorecard approach with multiple metrics, which we've seen employed in Vermont and DC. Another relatively new development is the use of fuel neutral MMBTU targets on top of existing energy and demand savings targets. And this is exemplified in New York and Massachusetts. And this approach helps to promote more comprehensiveness across fuel types and also to help address electrification. What's particularly notable for this discussion are 2 recent developments. So in California, and I appreciate that other panels will have covered this more extensively, so just at a high level, the PUC recently reorganized its efficiency programs into 3 distinct portfolios. The first is a resource acquisition, the second market support, and then the third is equity. And the framework here is built around 2 key concepts. First, the separating of near-term energy savings goals, which is more traditional, from longer-term market transformation and equity goals. And then secondly, for the resource acquisition portfolio, they've adopted a total system benefit metric that accounts for energy system and carbon goals. So the developments in California are, as I mentioned, being discussed in other panels, but what's noteworthy here is that the adoption of the TSB metric is really a fundamental shift away from using energy savings as the basis for goal setting in favor of a more holistic approach. And then the second example I just wanted to briefly touch on is Massachusetts, where Matt's based. We recently saw out of that state the enactment of the new Climate Act, and key here is that the Mass Saves efficiency programs have been reinforced as a cornerstone climate policy tool. And pursuant to the Act, a GHG reduction goal is established for the Mass Saves 3-year energy efficiency plans. And also to note, both at the state level and through the Efficiency Council, equity and workforce and market development have been highlighted as priority areas for action as well. So again, here we see a state imposing a new mandate and target on its efficiency programs. And while I have you, I would be remiss if I didn't say that it's critical that it's not just about targets. They are moving first in some jurisdictions, but budgets, evaluation, performance incentives, cost effectiveness tests, as the others mentioned, and other aspects of the efficiency framework really need to be aligned, seeing as they're all interrelated. So we can't just change one. In fact, if we, were to just focus on changing the mandate or target, pull that in one direction will ultimately distort the system. So one thing that I just wanted to mention here, go back, apologies, is really back to that idea of efficiency being traditionally viewed as an economic utility resource, with jurisdictions predominantly setting energy savings targets. Under these resource acquisition frameworks, program administrators are typically measuring impact in the near term, so 3 to 5 years out, and are procuring energy savings through programs with a current reliance on a widget-based attribution system. As we start to impose new targets such as greenhouse gas emissions on these programs, you start to move to more of a market transformation focus. And resource acquisition is not in opposition to market transformation, but it doesn't necessarily facilitate it either. So, for example, longer time horizons, workforce development, other issues that come into play when we start to think about climate and electrification. So as an industry, we do need to be aware of the new mandates and targets on efficiency programs, and that can change the calculus. And therefore, when we're starting to think through the implications, we need to potentially reconsider the old frameworks or paradigms under which we've been operating, so as not to take away the potential to achieve or facilitate our desired outcomes. So my last slide. Really, my goal today is not to answer the question of whether we need to change targets or the frameworks in which they operate, and ultimately what that might look like. It's complex, and we're really in the early stages of thinking through these issues, but it is something that we and others are spending time on, and that we're going to have to increasingly grapple with as these other goals and considerations are layered onto efficiency and efficiency program platforms. But when it comes down to it, choosing the right target metric or metrics will depend on the prime objective of a jurisdiction. There are lots of pros and cons and unintended consequences with any of these approaches, which is really a whole other presentation in and of itself. Ultimately, it does come down to why a jurisdiction is pursuing efficiency now and the overall policy context in that jurisdiction. But we do expect efficiency targets and frameworks to continue to evolve given the focus on climate, electrification, other priorities, and whether the future efficiency landscape looks somewhat similar to what it is today or altogether different as new approaches emerge is really yet to be determined. So food for thought. I'll leave it there for now, and thanks for your time, and I look forward to the discussion here or as we move over to the Zoom platform.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. Just waiting for Matt to come on. All right, we're all back. So thank you, the presenters. That was great. We have a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to go through those, and if we don't make it through them, we'll continue them on the Zoom, but also have some discussion over there. So the first question we have, excuse me, for Alan. Alan, have you thought about ways to elevate energy efficiency's role in the Northwest Council's latest draft power plan, specifically how to show on a short time scale that it shouldn't lose out quite so much to renewable energy?
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit too late for the 8 power plants in the final draft that's being shopped, and they're going to vote on it in February. And it would really blow up the plan if we tried to do that. So a lot of people are calling for an investigation into the real and full value of energy efficiency by incorporating all those Jedi-Kreber benefits into the analysis, and then take those results and amend the plan. And then that becomes a template for how other states and other regions can do this kind of thing.
Great, thanks. You're up on the next question here, Alan. Do you have practical steps to properly value energy efficiency's contribution to resilience? And there are a lot of kinds of resilience. So Alan, and then anyone else, and then Matt and Leslie, if you have any thoughts as well.
Yeah. So I'd really like to hear what Mike has to say about your ideas about this. My goal here was really to kickstart this conversation about modernizing and updating the cost-effectiveness methodology for energy efficiency, where we need to evaluate and quantify each of the benefits in the Jedi-Kreber. And once they're quantified, then they need to be valued with energy efficiency and added to the value of energy efficiency. So there's multiple ways to do that. There is precedence in the Northwest with the Power Act in 1980. They knew back then, 40 years ago, that energy efficiency had non-quantifiable benefits. So what they did was they put an adder in there, 10% adder for energy efficiency as a bonus for transmission losses and the other environmental benefits that they didn't quite know what they were. So in effect, energy efficiency was cost effective if it was up to 10% more costly than the alternative marginal resource, it was acquired. So the same could be done with the Jedi-Kreber benefits. Evaluate and quantify each one, have it be an adder to energy efficiency. Maybe we get 20 to 30% more. And then what we really need to do is figure out each one of these things in Jedi-Kreber benefits and figure out how they work, and then use them to quantify it and then reset the target megawatt hour and the cost effectiveness thresholds.
All right, thanks. Yeah, Matt, do you have some thoughts?
This is a really good question, and it's above my pay grade.
All right. All right, so next, Matt, we have a question for you. When doing carbon accounting for energy efficiency measures, how do you account for the cumulative peak load impact of electrification measures and the associated likely marginal generation carbon impacts?
This is a really good question. So right now, the answer is there's a lot of uncertainty in it. Massachusetts did a roadmap study that looked at the kind of pathway to net zero by 2050, economy-wide. And that study estimated that the region would switch from, on a 2050 net zero by 2050 pathway, the region would switch from a summer peaking electric grid to a winter peaking electric grid in like 2028 or 2030, if we do the scale that we need to reach the goals that we've set. And Laura, you might have heard of that being in Vermont. so there's some uncertainty there because we know that when there's more winter peak, it's going to kind of change the market rules at ISO, and there's going to be a lot of kind of unforeseen things happening there. That being said, we do have kind of an easy built-in tool in New England, which is the AESC study. For those of you who aren't familiar, every 3 years they do this study. It's an avoided cost quantification exercise that goes through like the whole range of all the different avoided costs. And they provide at the end of it a helpful set of tools that you can use to generate avoided costs under different scenarios. So in my analysis, I use that to assess the likely impact on distribution improvement costs and all the other kind of costs that you incur by electrification. A lot of it is based kind of fundamentally on the EIA's annual energy outlook with some revisions to account for kind of state-specific climate policies like RPS and things like that.
Great, thanks. And well, some of these are directed towards specific. If anyone has any thoughts, please just let me know before I move on. So, all right, next, Matt again. How does SMUD's calculation, solution 5, account for the cost associated with the infrastructure improvements required to manage the higher electrical loads?
So SMUD itself, I can't speak to. As I said, I kind of like lifted their innovation for my own purposes, and I want to make sure that I acknowledge that this is something that they have developed. I don't have visibility into that on their end. For my purposes, all that stuff is built into the AESC to a reasonable degree. So if you use avoided costs related to T&D that they've assessed for the region, that's kind of how I did it. I used just the avoided costs that are given in that study, just like all the efficiency programs in the region do.
Great, thanks. And I guess this can go for everyone if you have any thoughts. Oh yeah, Ellen, please.
So the traditional cost-effective methodology for energy efficiency we quantify the benefits. We take in energy saved, capacity saved, and we can figure out benefit of coincident peak and reduction in that. But I think it actually needs to go further than that. That's the whole point of this kind of Jedi Kreber stuff, which is we need to expand that definition from just the real basic traditional cost-effective methodology to incorporate the real benefits that energy efficiency uniquely brings to the table. And then we can modify and enhance the amount of the targets and enhance the amount of energy efficiency we get. So it's kind of a new way of thinking about the methodology. It's not just the traditional one, but it's also how do we incorporate those non-quantifiables and quantify them? Because all engineers love to quantify everything, right? So we can do it. I've done it. I'm not even an engineer.
That's great.
That makes two of us.
Well, thanks. So we have just a couple of minutes left, and there's one question left here from the audience. So I'll get the thoughts from our presenters here, and then I have a few questions I know I have for the presenters that will continue on over to Zoom after this. So does anyone have any insights into the drivers that control utilities to make strong climate commitments, corporate social responsibility, mandates, climate champions? What do you see as the drivers?
I'm happy to jump in first on this one. So
Please.
I think the list that Mike has here is good. It definitely, these are all potential drivers and will depend on what's in place in a particular jurisdiction. Something that I think is really important that's missing are performance incentives associated with potential climate action. So it comes back to kind of the framework under which one is operating and if we are moving towards climate, whether or not the performance incentive mechanism reflects that, especially if the target starts to. because ultimately utilities have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders if they're private, and if their performance incentive does reflect some type of target around climate, then that's going to be a strong driver for action. I think that I would add that one to the list too.
Great. Yeah.
I would
Yeah, I
echo
think-
that. I'm sorry, you go ahead, Alan.
No, go ahead, Matt.
I would echo that. I think that's really important factor. It's, I just reiterate, utilities are in many cases, in most cases, private companies, and energy efficiency is not their core business. As hard as it may be for those of us in this conference to believe, it's been our experience that the PAs that we work with in New England are they're all ready and willing and able to make significant contributions to greenhouse gas mitigation. But because it's not really their core business, it really has taken mandates, legislative change, in order to kind of open the door for some of this work. For instance, in Massachusetts, I think in 2018, we Acadia Center and some of our partners helped to pass an amendment to the enabling statute for our efficiency programs that specifically called out strategic electrification, because it was just a question, and it remains a question in many states, whether that could whether electrification was an appropriate efficiency measure, and sometimes that's what it takes to go to the legislature just to clarify.
Yeah, great.
Great. Just something really quick, Alan, before we're.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's an all of the above strategy. You need all those arrows in your quiver to deal with this. Each utility is unique, and really good to have favorable boards and favorable commissions. Make sure asking their customers what they think really helps them get there. But legislative, having targets, climate action plans at the state level, cap and trade or cap and reduce, and then incorporating those into the incentives for greenhouse gas emissions reductions is a really good first step.
Great. Well, thank you to all the presenters, Alan, Matt, Leslie. Really appreciate it. We are going to be over on the Zoom link. The producer put in the chat. There it is on the screen. So please join us. We can actually have some conversation and interact instead of just typing in your questions. So we'll see you over there. Thank you for everyone.